Hey everybody. Okay, so Andy and a couple of you emailed me asking for a little bit of help. Um, you're still my students, so I'm happy to do this if this is something that would help you guys. And I want to be clear. I'm not trying to step on anybody's toes. I'm not trying to get Mr. Young's way, any of that stuff. But if there's anything I can help with, I mean, I know I'm not there anymore, but I'm still happy to help you guys with what I can. Um, so. Um, what we had talked about, Andy and I just emailed about, is maybe just trying to do some video lessons. Hopefully, it will help kind of bridge some of the gaps as Mr. Young gets, kind of gets his feet wet. I mean, you got to understand it's really hard to teach IB, especially when you're just kind of thrown into first year. But I don't mind doing this. I love this stuff. I don't know that I can do any live sessions, like a live YouTube session. But what I'm thinking is I'll record this and hopefully, do a series of them. If you guys find them helpful, please, nobody needs to kiss my butt or anything like that. If this isn't something you need, don't watch it. If you're watching and it's not helping, then don't. Let me know and I'll stop recording. But like I said, if I can help out, I'm happy to do that in my free time. Like right now, I'm at a rink waiting on a hockey practice, but hey, what the heck. So anyway, what I think I'll try to do is maybe walk you through some stuff, give you some tips, some advice, on certain things. So this one is not, I'm not going to over any content, but just make sure everybody's on the same page with the syllabus. I talked to a couple of you and said that they're just using the syllabus that I gave them. So the topics should be about the same. Make sure he's on the same page with the test, the exam, all that good stuff, and that way hopefully it'll help direct you. The other thing that you guys need to do, regardless of me or Mr. Young or Viv or anybody else, is make sure that you're doing some reading, okay? Especially if you feel like maybe there's a little bit of a gap between old teacher me and new teacher there. You guys can always fill that in with reading, and I know you're video generation and YouTube generation and all that, but nothing beats reading the content from a textbook, just like chapter notes from the American Yop last year, and for those that had sophomores out of your MSCO book back in the day. So anyway, IB history, right? You have your IA, which, in my understanding, as of October 30th, you haven't started yet. So I don't know what to say there. Like you should be doing that. But maybe bring that up, and you guys kind of were ready to go on that. So maybe it's a way to get started and see what you can do talking to Mr. Young. But you got your IA and you got paper 1, 2, and 3, right? So this, I think, is what I sent Ms. Pineda and Mr. Young. So Andy said they're using the same syllabus. So if it looks a little bit different, that's fine. But paper 1 is your prescribed subject. Paper 2 is what you should be learning this year. I'm happy to help with. And paper 3 is some of the stuff we learned last year. A few things added to those this year and a few extra things. So the way it breaks down here, and I just pulled up the May 26th one so you guys can see this. Hopefully you've already looked at this. I'm guessing Viv's put it out at some point, and I already lost history there. There we go. So May 4th, you'll do paper 1 and paper 2 back to back, usually about 5 minutes in between, and then you'll have paper 3 the morning after. So that gives you an idea. Yeah. Sorry about that. Everybody say hi to Charlie. Bye. Love you. She just took my Powerade. Nothing to drink. Anyway, so paper 1 and 2, paper 1's an hour long. That is the skills-based paper, so you have to know the history content, but that one is very much a skill-based paper. You've got to be able to do source analysis. You've got to have running comparisons. So I'll try to talk you through some of that techniques and show you a few things that I have. Paper 2 and paper 3 are essentially the exact same way. They're graded almost identically. A few subtle differences, but from your approach as the student writing the exam, you're going to approach them the same way. Okay. I've graded both for IB and like I said, the rubrics. There's little subtle differences, but essentially the structure is the exact same way. So once you learn the technique for writing one, you know the technique for writing both. Biggest thing with these, of course, is the time. For paper 2, you have 2 essays, you have an hour and 30 minutes. For paper 3, you have 3 essays, you have 2 hours and 30 minutes. So paper 2 is the most condensed because essentially you're trying to churn these essays out in 40 to 45 minutes, 40 if you got a little bit of planning time. And then paper 3, you got an average of about 50 minutes or so. The biggest difference from mindset is paper 2 is a global history paper. So you're approaching it from the perspective of world history. Paper 3 is the regional history, so that's history of the Americas. So you're going to have a very American-centric, not necessarily U.S.-centric, although more of that than anything else, but it's the Americas. Okay. So other little subtleties between 2 and 3. Paper 2, you have to choose two different topics. So what I've always taught is authoritarian states and Cold War. It's my understanding that they're still doing that this year. So you'll answer one essay from authoritarian states, or excuse me, one prompt from authoritarian states, and then one prompt from Cold War. On paper 3, you can answer any 3 questions. So all the topics on paper 2 and 3 have 2 options. So there'll be 2 authoritarian states questions, 2 Cold War questions, etc., etc. So the same thing for all the topics in paper 3. There's 2 options. Okay. So for paper 2, you have to choose one of the 2 authoritarian states. That's topic 10, and then one of the Cold War options. That's topic 12. For paper 3, it is any 3 questions you like. So if you enjoy both civil rights questions and you've studied heavily for that, you can answer both civil rights questions, and then you just have to find another. So going back to the syllabus here, paper 1 is rights and protest. So this is comparative analysis. No, not a comparative analysis. It's a comparative study of U.S. and South African civil rights, assuming Mr. Young isn't changing anything. So U.S. civil rights we started to cover last year. You should have a pretty good feel for. So the thing that you need to be learning is South Africa, okay? I know Viv had asked me about copies of Long Walk to Freedom. I told her where they were. I've always used Long Walk to Freedom as a way to introduce South African history to you. So if you're reading that, you're getting exposed to it. I also have a PowerPoint on South Africa, which I can share with you, or maybe make a video where I'm going over it. What I did with my seniors is we usually read Long Walk to Freedom. We had a couple of days every couple of weeks where we'd have some book discussions. And then in the spring semester, we came back and kind of hit some of the other things with South African history. The biggest thing on paper 1, aside from it being a skill-based paper, is that it's going to be either U.S. or South African civil rights. It's not a comparison. You're not going to do both of them. It's not a pick and choose. It will be one or the other. You will find out on that afternoon of May 4th or whatever it said it was. So it's very important that you prep for both. Civil rights you're going to study for anyway because it's part of paper 3. So the biggest thing is to make sure you know enough South African history to deal with that if it is South African history. So I don't know, email me or whatever if we need to do more stuff on South Africa, or let me know how you guys are handling it if you're reading Long Walk to Freedom. I don't want to spend too much time on that if the case. The other thing is paper 1 does have very specific time frames. You can see right here. U.S. civil rights between 1954 and 1965. So that is Brown 1 decision through the Voting Rights Act of 65 is the scope of paper 1. And then 48 to 64 in South Africa, which is the election rise of the National Party, which is the one that implements apartheid formally. And then 1964 ending with what we call the treason trial, which is where Nelson Mandela and his co-conspirators are sent off to prison forever and ever and ever. Not treason trial, Rivonia trial, I'm sorry. So you have a very specific window to look at in those two deals in terms of what they will ask you about. And of course, with U.S. civil rights on paper 3, it can be a broader window of time. That being said, if you are reading Long Walk to Freedom, or if you're going to read Long Walk to Freedom, like I said, I think it is a phenomenal book, and I don't like a lot of autobiographies, but that's a great one. It's also a wonderful introduction into South Africa, just as an exposure piece, kind of like a knight or a mouse in terms of exposing students to the Holocaust. Long Walk to Freedom works the same way. The nice thing is, for Long Walk to Freedom, if you are reading it, if he's assigning it and all that, please pass along this piece of information. You only need to read through part 7. Okay, part 7 is the Rivonia trial, and that is the end of the time period that you're going to be tested on for paper 1. So really and truly, part 1 is actually outside of the scope because it's Nelson Mandela's childhood. You should read that for context, get a flavor on that. But somewhere in the middle of part 2, which is over Johannesburg, it kind of jumps into 1948. So that window of time is what you need to take notes on, study on, pay attention to details, learn some key names and all that. Again, I'm not going to get into any content tonight necessarily, but we can start going over some South African stuff if you need to, or I can make some videos for that. So paper 2, again, you're going to have 4 options, 2 from 10, 2 from 12. You pick 1 from each. Please, please, please remember that. If you answer both authoritarian states questions, they only grade the first one. If you answer both Cold War, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I have always taught with authoritarian. I shouldn't say I've always taught. For the last 8 to 9 years, maybe 10 years, for authoritarian states, I taught Hitler, Third Reich in Germany, and then Mao. And then the last couple of years, I've done a lot more with Fidel Castro. I used to do some other stuff, but Castro works so much better. First of all, he's super interesting, but the best thing about Castro is there's a lot of stuff on Castro that will also fit in paper 3. So the name of the game here is we as teachers will design a curriculum that overlaps as much as possible, and that also helps you guys study and prep, because you study one thing and you can apply it to 2 or more exams. Truth be told, as much as I love teaching Hitler and the Third Reich, he is the outlier here. I've had a number of students over the last couple of years that have only studied for Mao and Castro, and I'll explain that real quick. There are 3 facets to authoritarian states: what Ivy calls the rise to power, the consolidation of power, and then the aims and results of policies. So the way the questions work is you will get a question that deals with the rise, the consolidation, or the policies, right? It won't be all of the above. It's not just a tell me about Hitler kind of thing. It's discuss the nature of opposition groups in the rise of one authoritarian state. And you're like, oh, I'm going to write about Hitler, right? So there's not going to be a specific question about any of these people or their regimes. It's a question that's open-ended and generic, which is great because it allows you to utilize what you've learned. So with that being said, you got rise, you got consolidation, you've got aims and results of policies, okay? So they're either going to ask you to talk about 1 or 2. 2 is obviously the most common, okay? So what that means is when you really stop and think about it, you need to learn Adolf Hitler's rise to power, their consolidation of power, their policies, and then repeat the same thing with Mao Zedong in China and then with Fidel Castro. So it's really 9 things. But if you do the math on this, if you study all 3 components, rise, consolidation, and aims and results of policies, and you only actually study 2 of the dictatorships, authoritarian states, you can answer a question on the test, because like I said, there's going to be 2 questions, so you might get one that's a 1 or a comparison. It might be this or that, but the point is you have to study at least 2 of the dictatorships. Oh, I misspoke, I'm sorry. If you study 2 of them and do at least 2 of their facets, right? So 4 out of 9, you're guaranteed to answer 1 question. Now, that being said, I'm only suggesting that because I know some of you feel like maybe you're a little bit behind. So as you learn and then start thinking about studying, and I know studying's a little ways off, but March, April, May, really March, April, because the test is on May 4th, that can save you some time really fixing it. Of course, the downside is, and this is something I've always explained in class, it's pros and cons. You've got to decide what's different. What might be good for one of you might not be good for the other. Some people like to prep everything. Obviously, that's the best case scenario, because as you get into Third Reich and Communist China and socialist / sort of communist Cuba, you'll see that certain questions, like if we're talking about social issues, China and really all of them are good. But if it's a rise to power, that might be something that's easier in Germany and China, and not so much with Cuba. So if you can study everything, it gives you more opportunity to address questions to the highest level. Look for the 5, the 6, the 7 on those, as opposed to if you fixate on, like I said, just 2 regimes and 2 things, then you're only guaranteed to get 1 question that you can answer. So you're literally putting all those eggs in one basket. But I want to make sure everybody knows that. If I was still in the classroom, I'd be telling you the same thing. Because you need to know that, and you need to understand, well, yes, you should study it all, you should learn it all. When it comes to studying, you need to decide what's best for you, because some of you have the whole shebang of exams, some of you have a few less, so it depends on what your time is. I hope that's not overly confusing, because ultimately it's 2 questions, 1 essay, right? So I'm happy to make videos over these. I have notes on, actually, I have a lot of notes on Nazi Germany and Communist China. I actually teach Castro a little bit different, but I started some of that stuff with you guys last year. The truth is, and we all know this, some of you didn't do any of those readings, so you're way behind on Castro. Those of you that did it, you want to go back and look at your notes on all those Castro readings I gave you. That was me trying to make sure I introduced some of that in the junior year. Okay, so there's that, and then the second topic is the Cold War superpower tensions. This one is similar in the fact that you have phases: ideology, foundation, early developments, or case studies, or politics. So these 3 bullet points, this is how the questions are structured. You'll get a question that'll deal with this or this, or this. Okay. With the, skip the second bullet for now, but with the first and this third, it's very similar in terms of the way the questions are worded to topic 10. Obviously, it's just about the Cold War instead of that, so you can have all kinds of information. The Cold War is, it's a pain in the butt. I love teaching it. I love learning about it. It is a pain in the butt because it is so much information. It's one of those things that you've got to make sure that you dig into a level of depth that's not superficial. Again, I've got lots of resources for you on that. I'm sure Mr. Young has some good stuff too. But the biggest thing is making sure that you know different things. Now, that being said, case studies. This is a unique thing within topic 12 that's not in topic 10, is that they can ask you about Cold War crises. Sometimes one, sometimes two. So the question might ask you to discuss in depth a specific Cold War crisis. It'll give you a command term, evaluate the extent that this changed that, or that kind of stuff. But it's going to be about one Cuban Missile Crisis, one Cold War crisis, or sometimes it asks you to compare them. If you have to compare them, it wants you to do it from different regions. Real quick on regions, because I didn't mention this in this one. IB looks at the Americas, Africa, Europe, Asia. Those are your IB regions. So anytime it talks about anything from a different region, you need to make sure that if you're talking about one, not the other. So you know one of the reasons why I teach these three authoritarian states is that this is Europe, this is Asia, this is the Americas. So you don't have any overlap or any of that stuff. So if it says each one different region, you know you're going to be talking about a different region. With the Cold War crises, it's the same thing. So the one that everybody needs to learn is the Cuban Missile Crisis. You need the Cuban Missile Crisis because it's relevant to Fidel Castro, it's relevant to the Cold War as a big picture, and it can also be your...
Hey, don't break the speed limit!
Kids are lying. It can also be a question on case studies. The second one, and I've flipped back and forth, and sometimes I do the Berlin blockade, Prague Spring, there are some others. So it's one of those cases where you all need to learn the Cuban Missile Crisis. And you need to know, especially when it comes to case studies, this is where you need to know lots of details. So some of you would be very, very good at this. Others of you, you're going to have to learn it, but you probably need to realize that that's not the question you want to answer on the Cold War. And the reason I say that is this is where you've got to know a lot of details in history. So there's the big picture stuff, cause and effect, continuity, change, perspective, blah, 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 all those fun, historical thinking skills. But with the Cold War crisis, not only do you have to know those, but you got to know details. Like you got to be able to remember who was the Secretary of State, who was he talking to on the Russian side of things, and how did RFK and JFK do things differently, and what was Nikita Khrushchev's role in it as compared to Castro and Delta. So names and dates and some of that stuff that some of you don't like and aren't great at is going to be really important in case studies when we're talking about the Cold War crisis. Okay. And again, I say that because yes, you all need to learn it. But when it comes to studying time, it's never too early to start studying or start thinking about studying. You need to know where you should spend your time, right? And there's however many ended up staying for the senior year, hopefully 14 or 15, 16, 17 of you. But you're all going to kind of approach this differently for what's best for you. But within the Cold War, like I said, if you study the big picture stuff, ideology and foundation, policies, conflict, discord, I will tell you this, and this is where it might be fantastic to have a little bit of Jordan and maybe a whole lot of Young in there. When it comes to the later part of the Cold War, I never taught that very much in class. It was one of those things where to teach it, I had to lose other things, so I didn't spend as much time on it. So when it comes to the way I approach the Cold War in terms of teaching, I spend a ton more time on that. So if you're getting videos from me or resources from me, you're going to learn a lot about the early Cold War and then the crises. Okay, that's going to be my focus. The latter part of the Cold War, particularly the 70s and 80s, is not something I spend a lot of time. I do have some resources to give you guys, but it's not going to be all the detail you need for an IB level essay. So that's kind of where I make my choices as a teacher there. So if Mr. Young's there, not if Mr. Young's there, Mr. Young is way more confident and comfortable teaching this, so you might get a little bit of overlap with that. Okay. Now, paper 3, you can see here I've got topic 14, topic 16, and topic 17. That's what I narrowed it down to for my classes. Again, anybody can change this. They can do a little bit more, a little bit less. But with topic not topic 3, with paper 3, yeah, 3 S's right. Like I said, this one's different because you can answer any 3 you want, okay? I said 4 topics. Do I still have a 4th one in there? No. So that's an old syllabus. I don't know if it's updated on your end or not. But there was years where I taught 4 topics. The last, really since COVID, I stopped teaching 4 and only went with 3. Again, it's all the eggs in one basket. But realistically, if I give you 3 good topics, that gives you 6 questions. You got to choose 3 from. If you can learn a 4th topic, all the better, because then you get 8 questions to pick 3 from. So, but the way I went is, first and foremost, we did a lot with civil rights last year. You guys should be, I'm not saying you're ready today to write stuff on civil rights, but with a little bit of review, a little bit of addition, you guys should be really, really comfortable writing about civil rights. And civil rights in the Americas is an awesome subject, not just because, you know, we have a giant dork and love civil rights. It's because it has a lot of options. This is the whole shebang. This is all of the Dr. King stuff, but it's all of the John Lewis stuff. It's all of the Malcolm X and, you know, Black Panther, the Nation of Islam, Chicano movements. It's feminism. It's second wave feminism. It's the Students for Democratic Society. So it's every kind of civil rights and social movement in 1945 or post 1945 Americas. So it really gets heavy into the 60s, a little bit in the 70s, but this is where you can learn about counterculture and the hippie movement and a whole bunch of stuff. So I tend to lean very heavily on that in preparation to try to help my students make sure that they can answer at least one civil rights question, but there's been a number of years I've had lots of students write both civil rights questions. Now, that's also an advantage, because if you write both civil rights questions, that means you should have 3 to 4 other options for one more, right? So I'm going to jump back to topic 14 here. Topic 14 is a funky one, and this is one of the last switches I made right around COVID, okay? Political developments in Latin America. There's a lot of stuff in here that I never taught. I'm not good enough to teach. I'll just be very honest with you, because it's stuff I don't specialize in. But you'll notice here in some of these bullet points: Cuban Revolution, rule of Fidel Castro's populist leaders. Now, in 2 countries is a problem, but here's where Fidel Castro is amazing. Like I said, you're going to study Fidel Castro for paper 2. And when I say paper 2, Fidel Castro is obviously going to fit in the Cold War and in authoritarian states, just like Mao. They both fit in both topics, okay? And that's where I was going, saying kind of Hitler's the outlier, because Hitler doesn't apply in the Cold War other than kind of foundational. So as much as I love that topic, he's, in terms of studying and prep for the exam, he maybe is the most expendable of the 3, okay? So just keep that in mind. But you'll notice here, Fidel Castro appears a couple times. And what I looked at was some trends in the IB exam, and there's oftentimes, there are a lot of questions that either allow you to use Fidel Castro or just straight up are about Fidel Castro. So he is our favorite guy because he's paper 2, both topics, and he's paper 3 as well. And he can appear in a lot of different ways. So that's why I have this one in there. And then, of course, the last topic is Cold War and Americas. I hope you can see the overlap. The biggest difference, again, is between paper 2 and 3, global perspective versus American perspective. So when we're answering Cold War in the Americas, you're only talking about the Americas. Please remember, the Americas is more than the United States. It's an IB test, right? Not a U.S. history test. Now, that being said, the questions can be tricky, okay? In that a lot of times they ask questions about 2 countries in the Americas, right? So, you're going to write about the United States. The key is having that second question or that second country when it is appropriate, okay? And this is, again, why I put a heavy emphasis on Castro and Cuba, because there's your go-to. So if I'm writing a question that is comparing 2 countries during the Cold War in the Americas, it's going to be the United States and Cuba. The exceptions to this that I've always told my students, if you're writing an extended essay where your IA is dealing with something relative to the Cold War outside of the United States but inside the Americas, aka Mexico, Argentina, Honduras, Chile, I don't know, maybe somebody's writing about Canada this year. Usually not, but it's typically Mexico. Then you can utilize that research. But other than that, you're going to lean heavily on the United States and our good friends in Cuba. Okay? So you kind of get the idea with that. So, internal assessment I'm not going to mess with, because again, that's Young's issue right now. I can't assign it for you. I can't help it. I'm just not allowed. So that's the biggest thing in terms of course structure. So I thought I'd lay that out because that's something we would talk about very early in the year. Make sure everybody's comfortable with it. I feel like, at least maybe doing this video, you've kind of got the audio. You can save this somewhere. Um, just not bookmark it, but save it. If you need to, you can come back to this where you've got that information. Because typically, I'd have gone over this in August, and then right around now, somebody had been like, "What's on the exam? I don't get it." So that way, you've kind of got this because we're supposed to know this. You guys don't. You've got a lot on your plates right now, extended essays and all that good stuff. So anyway, that's kind of the breakdown of this. So what I'm thinking here for those that want this is I'll try to make some videos over content. Again, it won't have that like total classroom feel. It'll be more like a college audio lecture, but I can pull up my notes and go through it with you, and that should give you guys the opportunity to ask questions. I mean, at least get some content. I know you can read notes, but not sometimes, most of you, it helps to hear the explanations. I'll try not to make too many stupid jokes, but at least on YouTube, you can set me to faster speed, so if I'm too long and boring, there you go. Yeah, that's about it, guys. Like I said, if you guys don't have my new email, it is, I don't have it anywhere, and I don't know where to write it, but it's I'll just ask Andy. Andy's got my email, and I think Sam's got it, I think Jade's got it. So if anybody needs it, that's my new email address, or I think in Remind, if it still works. My Remind died, so I don't know what's going on with that, but you've got my personal email. If you guys need anything, reach out. Like I said, I mean, I know I had to leave, and that sucks. I miss you guys, but I'm happy to help. I will. All you gotta do is ask. So if there's anything that I can help with, or you have questions you want us to ask, like some of the videos, at least you can watch them, maybe get some content, shoot me some questions, and bounce back and forth, and get a couple of questions, same thing. Maybe I can clarify some of the same content. I really don't want to overstep my bounds and get Mr. Young's way. He is the teacher in the classroom. You guys, try to be respectful, do all the right things and all that. Hopefully you're having some fun with that. If I can help add to any of the history, I will. That's about it. Also, congratulations, babe. We were watching you. That's great. Anyway, like I said, if you need anything, Andy, Sam, Jade for sure have my email. Let me know. You guys can always bug me.